I've always despised hot, overgrown places. Gardens, hothouses, conservatories, anything where the air feels too heavy to breathe, where the plants grow too thick and close as if they're watching you. Maybe it's because I've always preferred clean lines, things set in order, facts laid out like bones on a slab. But plants, they grow how they like. They twist, coil, invade. So when the city commissioner asked me to look into the matter of the abandoned glasshouse district, and more specifically the conservatory at its center, I hesitated. It wasn't my usual kind of case. No murder on the streets, no stolen jewel. Just whispers. Vanishings. Gardeners who never came home. Lovers who went for midnight strolls among the glass domes and never walked out. And lately, people swore they'd seen the plants glowing at night, red as blood. I told myself it was nonsense. Superstition, rumor, nothing more. But I'd learned long ago that the worst things, the truly dangerous things, always start as whispers. The conservatory lay at the far end of the city, past the derelict train yard and along a broken cobblestone road where fog sat thick in the hollows. The building rose like a blackened cathedral, its arched panes of glass long since cracked, its iron ribs eaten with rust. Ivy crawled over its bones, thick as ropes, and every so often I thought I saw the glass breathe, condensation fogging the inside, as though the place itself exhaled. I paused at the gates. They were wrought iron, twisted into shapes of flowers that had long since bent into claws. A city crest was still visible at the top, a stylized rose split in half. Someone had nailed a sign across the gate. Condemned. Keep out. The wood was splintered, as if someone had clawed at it. The key in my pocket felt heavier than it should. Commissioner Ainsworth had pressed it into my palm like a curse. "One night inside," he'd said. "If you find nothing, I'll let the place rot. But the council wants an answer. And the people, they want to know what feeds their fears." I unlocked the gate. The hinges screamed like something dying. Inside, the air changed. Damp. Choking. Heavy with the perfume of rot and green things growing where they shouldn't. The glass above caught the last smear of twilight and turned it red, bleeding the colors down into the greenhouse like a cathedral of blood. I wasn't alone. At first, it was just a sound. A soft rustle in the leaves, like something sliding between the vines. I turned, hand on my revolver, but saw only plants. They grew in impossible profusion, ferns taller than a man, blossoms as wide as my chest, roots snaking across the tiles like veins. The floor had once been patterned marble, but it was cracked now, and shoots forced their way through every fissure. "Detective Pierce?" The voice startled me. A woman stepped from the shadows, her figure half silhouetted in the dim glow. She wore a heavy gardener's coat, though it looked moth-eaten, and her gloves were stained green. Her hair was pinned back severely, her eyes sharp as glass. "Who are you?" I asked. "Eliza Merritt," she said. "The caretaker. At least I was. I heard someone was finally sent to look into this place." I frowned. "I was told the conservatory had been abandoned for years." "It was," she said, her voice brittle. "But someone had to keep the gates locked. To keep things in. To keep people out." Her gaze flicked toward the far end of the hall, where the foliage grew so thick it formed a wall of green. Vines hung like curtains. Behind them, something pulsed. A faint glow, like a coal buried deep. I followed her gaze. "What is it?" "You'll see," she whispered. I stepped further inside. My boots sank into damp soil that had swallowed the tiles. The smell grew worse, sweet and cloying, like flowers left too long in stagnant water. The glow deepened as I drew closer, and the plants seemed to shiver at my passing. Eliza, I said, why are you still here? Why stay if this place is condemned? She smiled faintly, but it was not a happy smile. Because it won't let me leave. Before I could press her, the sound came again, the rustle of leaves. But it was louder now. Heavier. As though something vast moved just out of sight. I drew my revolver. The vines parted on their own, slithering aside like living things, and revealed a chamber at the conservatory's heart. It was circular, its walls a dome of glass that rose high into shadow. And in the center stood a tree. At least, I thought it was a tree. Its trunk was pale, bone-colored, its bark peeling like skin. Its branches spread wide, dripping with vines that swayed though there was no wind. From those vines hung blossoms the color of fresh blood. They pulsed faintly, like beating hearts. And beneath the tree, half buried in soil and roots, lay bones. Dozens of them. Maybe more. Eliza stood at the edge of the chamber, her face expressionless. Do you see now? I lowered my revolver slightly, though every nerve screamed to keep it raised. What is it? Her eyes gleamed with something unreadable. It's what we planted. What we tended. What we fed. I stared at the tree. The roots twitched, shifting against the soil. A skull rolled free, its jaw hanging open in a silent scream. For the first time in a long while, I felt my stomach turn. Eliza, I said quietly, what did you feed it? Her voice was almost reverent. Only what it asked for. The glow from the blossoms deepened, red lights spilling across her face. And then the tree moved. The tree shuddered as though it had lungs. Its pale trunk split in places with wet cracks, and sap oozed forth, dark and thick. The smell hit me a moment later, coppery, metallic. Not sap. Blood. The blossoms opened in unison, spilling their glow across the chamber, and for the briefest moment I could have sworn I saw them turn. Not like flowers facing the sun. No. Like eyes fixing on me. I raised my revolver instinctively, though I knew a bullet would do little against something rooted in the earth. Eliza stood just beyond the roots, her hands clasped before her, as if she were a parishioner in some blasphemous church. Her voice trembled, yet she did not look away. It knows you, detective. It knows everyone who steps into its sight. It has a memory. I kept my revolver steady. Then what the hell does it remember? She didn't answer. Or maybe she couldn't. The roots began to writhe. They twisted in slow arcs across the floor, dragging soil and bones with them. One root coiled over the tiles like a serpent, stopping inches from my boots. I held my ground, though every instinct told me to step back. Eliza, I said carefully, you told me you were a caretaker. What did you mean when you said it wouldn't let you leave? Her eyes flicked toward me, and for the first time I saw fear there. Real fear. The longer you stay near it, the harder it becomes to walk away. It ties itself to you thread by thread. Your blood. Your breath. Your memories. You leave a piece of yourself behind, and when enough of you is left here, it calls you back. I glanced at the bones. Those gardeners? Her silence was answer enough. The vines above swayed again, blossoms spilling faint motes of light like sparks from a fire. They drifted downward, circling me in lazy spirals. When one landed on my sleeve, it seared through the fabric like acid. I slapped it off, the ember vanishing before it hit the ground. Eliza, I snapped, why stay at all? Why guard this place? Why not burn it to the ground? Her laugh was soft, humorless. We tried. Don't you understand? Fire doesn't hurt it. Axes don't cut it. Nothing man-made has ever touched it. Her voice dropped to a whisper. It's older than the glass. Older than the soil. Older than us. Before I could answer, the tree shifted again, and something fell from its branches. At first, I thought it was just another blossom. But it was heavier, wet. It landed with a soft thud and rolled across the tiles. A hand? Human. The skin was pale and waxy, the fingers curled tight as though it had clutched something in its last moment. I swore under my breath and stepped back. Eliza's face didn't change. If anything, she seemed resigned. Sometimes it sheds what it cannot keep. The air grew thicker, harder to breathe. The glow from the blossoms painted the chamber in shades of crimson. Every bone, every root, every crack in the tiles swam in that red light until it felt less like I stood in a conservatory and more like the belly of some beast. I needed distance. Perspective. Facts. I holstered my revolver slowly, never breaking eye contact with the tree. Eliza. You've told me what it is. Now tell me why. Who planted it? For the first time, her composure faltered. Her gaze dropped to the soil. That was before my time. Before my father's, even. The records say the conservatory was built to house rare plants from overseas. Exotic specimens. Gifts from patrons who wanted a marvel for the city. But there was one shipment, detective. One crate that arrived without a name. A sapling. Small, pale. Harmless, they thought. She glanced up at the tree. It grew fast. Too fast. The gardeners were proud. They called it the ivory rose. A wonder. Until the first man disappeared. Her voice cracked. By then it was too late. I paced slowly, circling the chamber, careful not to let the roots box me in. My mind worked through her story the way I worked through every case, sift fact from hysteria, truth from embellishment. But the bones under my boots were fact enough. And the city? I asked. They condemned the place, locked the gates, and just left it here. What else could they do? She said. You can't kill it. You can't move it. So they buried it in glass and iron and prayed no one would come too close. Her words landed like a weight in my chest. Because I had come too close. A sound broke through my thoughts then, faint at first, like the echo of a breeze. But it wasn't wind. It was humming. Low. Resonant. Almost human. It came from the blossoms. Dozens of them vibrated in unison, their petals quivering, filling the air with a droning hum that wormed its way into my skull. My teeth ached with it. My bones shook. I covered my ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't around me. It was inside me. Eliza swayed, her eyes fluttering shut. It's calling, she murmured. It always calls when it wants. The roots surged forward. Not fast, but inevitable. Like snakes moving through water. One wrapped around the fallen hand, dragging it back toward the trunk. Another brushed against my boot. That was enough. I fired. The gunshot cracked through the chamber, deafening in the glass dome. The bullet tore into the root, splattering sap across the soil. The hum faltered. The blossoms quivered. For the briefest second, the thing recoiled. And then the shot was gone, swallowed by the damp air. The sap sizzled where it touched the ground. The root I had struck writhed, retreating slightly. But the others held their ground. Eliza's eyes snapped open. She looked at me, horrified. You shouldn't have done that. Why? I growled, reloading. It bleeds. That means it can die. Her voice was hoarse. No. It doesn't die, detective. It remembers. The hum grew louder, rising into a shriek that set the glass trembling in its iron frame. Blossoms split wide, pouring out light until the chamber burned crimson. And in that moment, as the glow swallowed everything, I realized Eliza was right. The thing wasn't afraid of me. It was angry. I left the conservatory at dawn, though left was the wrong word. I staggered. The air outside felt sharp and clean compared to the suffocating thickness within, but it wasn't enough to clear the humming that still clung to my skull. It had followed me into my dreams, threading itself into the rhythm of my heartbeat. Eliza hadn't come with me. When I'd asked, she had only shaken her head, her eyes fixed on the tree. "I told you," she whispered. "It doesn't let go. Not of me." I didn't try to argue. Some chains can't be cut by reason. The city was waking as I reached my office. Carriages rattled along the cobblestones, vendors shouted from stalls, the smell of coffee drifted through the alleys. Life moved on, oblivious to what festered beneath the glass dome just 2 miles away. That ignorance wasn't innocence, it was neglect. And I'd never been good at ignoring rot once I'd seen it. I hung my coat, poured myself a drink, and opened the file drawer labeled Unsolved. Most detectives hate those drawers. They're graveyards. But I've always believed every ghost in there waits for a hand willing to drag it back into the light. It didn't take long to find what I needed. Disappearance, 1899. Groundskeeper E. Halloran. Case abandoned. The paper was yellow, the ink faded. A short report. Halloran was last seen tending the greenhouse late one evening. The door was locked from the outside. When it was opened, the man was gone. No footprints in the soil, no signs of a break-in. Just gone. I lit a cigarette and dug deeper. 1903, Lady Constance Merriweather. Patron of the conservatory. Body never recovered. Rumored suicide. Then another. And another. Dates stretching decades. Each tied to the same location. The reports varied in tone, sometimes a missing gardener, sometimes a vanished patron, sometimes a wealthy guest who had wandered off during a private gala. But the pattern was always the same. Inside the conservatory. Locked doors. No escape. The city had covered it well, burying each file under bureaucracy, stamping each case with phrases like lack of evidence and presumed misadventure. But all roads led back to that glass dome. I tapped ash into the tray, staring at the pile of papers. Eliza had said the tree remembered. Maybe she wasn't wrong. Maybe that was what the humming was, the sound of lives it had swallowed, still vibrating, still echoing. But I needed proof. Not just stories. Not just bones under dirt. Something I could drag before the city council, before a magistrate, before anyone who would listen. So I went to the archives. The municipal building was a cathedral of dust and iron. Files towered like tombstones, the air dry and stale. The clerk, a balding man with spectacles too large for his nose, barely looked up as I signed the visitor's ledger. I asked for records on the conservatory's founding. He shuffled off, muttering, and returned 20 minutes later with a box older than either of us. I carried it to a table, opened the lid, and pulled out brittle documents tied in string. The first was a ledger of shipments. Orchids, palms, ferns, each carefully catalogued with country of origin. Then, near the bottom, one sapling unmarked. Gift. Origin unknown. No donor listed. No shipping route. Just a weight, 37 pounds, and a note. Plant immediately. Fragile. The next document was stranger. Handwritten in ink so dark it still looked wet. The specimen thrives. Pale bark, rapid growth. Leaves of unusual texture. Recommend careful observation. Possible significance beyond botany. It wasn't signed. I flipped further and found a letter sealed in wax, the edges singed by time. It bore the crest of the Merriweather family, the same name as the vanished Lady Constance. To the Council, the new addition to the conservatory is a marvel unlike any other. Its beauty is otherworldly, its presence magnetic. Already, guests remark upon a sense of calm and reverence in its presence. I propose a gala to showcase it as the crown jewel of our collection. I sat back. So the wealthy hadn't just ignored the tree. They had celebrated it. Paraded it. Maybe they'd known what it was, maybe not. But they had invited the city's elite to gather around it, to drink champagne beneath its branches, to bask in its glow. And the disappearances had followed. I thumbed through the last of the box until my hand froze on a torn page. Half a journal entry, no name attached. Something wrong in the soil. Roots extend farther than expected, cracking through stone. Not natural. The gardeners speak of whispers. One swears he heard his own name from the leaves. Stronger every night. I fear we have made a grave error. The ink ended there, smudged as if the writer had been pulled away mid-sentence. I sat in that archive until the lamps flickered and the clerk coughed politely to remind me of closing. My pocket notebook was filled with copied lines, sketches of crests, fragments of timelines. Enough to make a picture, though not a clear one. The conservatory wasn't just a place for plants. It was a stage. A stage built for something the city had chosen not to see. Back in my office, I poured another drink and laid the papers across the desk. The hum in my skull hadn't faded. If anything, it had grown stronger since leaving the archives. I lit another cigarette, hoping the smoke would dull it. It didn't. Somewhere in the night, the phone rang. I snatched it up. Detective Pierce? The voice was male, low, urgent. Unfamiliar. Yes. You've been digging. I froze. Who is this? Silence stretched for 3 long seconds. Then, you want to know about the tree? Meet me at Dockside Warehouse 4. Midnight. Don't be late. The line clicked dead. I stared at the receiver. Dockside was no place for casual meetings. It was a sprawl of rusting cranes and rotting wood, where shadows lingered longer than men. Whoever had called, they knew about the conservatory. And they wanted me to know they knew. I poured the rest of my drink down the sink and grabbed my coat. If there was a thread to pull, I was going to pull it. Even if the whole city unraveled. The docks were a graveyard at night. Cranes loomed like skeletal arms against the mist, ropes creaked, and the tide slapped against wood pilings in a rhythm as steady as a heartbeat. The lamps, few that still burned, did little to chase away the shadows. They only carved them deeper. I checked my watch. 10 minutes to midnight. Warehouse 4 squatted at the far end, its corrugated walls streaked with rust, its windows blacked with grime. A padlock hung broken on the door. Someone had been here already. Inside, the air reeked of salt, oil, and damp wood. My footsteps echoed too loudly. I reached for the lighter in my pocket, flicked it open, and let the small flame guide me between stacks of crates. That was when I heard it. A cough. Low. Weak. Human. Detective Pierce? The voice came from the far corner. I moved closer, hand brushing the butt of my revolver. The flame revealed a figure slumped against a crate, a man, gaunt, gray at the temples, dressed in a once fine suit now stained with sea salt and dust. His eyes flicked up at me with something between fear and relief. You came, he rasped. And you are? He swallowed. Merriweather. Charles Merriweather. The name was a hammer blow. The family crest. The vanished Lady Constance. The gala invitations. It all circled back here. You're connected to the conservatory, I said. His lips twitched into something that might have been a smile. More than connected. My grandfather commissioned it. Built it as a gift to the city. But the gift was never ours to give. The hum in my skull pulsed harder, as though the tree itself had leaned closer to listen. What do you mean? He coughed again, harsh and wet. His hand came away from his mouth darkened with blood. The sapling, it wasn't bought, detective. It was taken. Dug from soil that should never have been disturbed. Brought here against every warning, carved into stone older than the city itself. My family thought it a treasure. We didn't understand. His eyes flicked to the shadows as though he feared they had ears. They fed it, he whispered. Fed it people. Disappearances weren't accidents. Not always. My grandfather believed the tree could grant longevity. Strength. He offered it guests at private galas. Men who wanted fortunes that would never die, women who wanted youth eternal. They gave themselves willingly, or were given by others. The tree swallowed them whole. I felt my throat tighten. You're saying? I'm saying the conservatory is not a garden. It's a tomb. A tomb with roots that keep digging. And every name missing from your files? They're still there, detective. Inside it. The lighter flickered. The shadows seemed thicker now, crowding closer. I struck the wheel again, but the flame only sputtered. Why tell me this? I asked. Merriweather's shoulders sagged. Because I can't carry it anymore. The family's rotted from the inside. I'm the last. And the tree's pull grows stronger every year. It whispers in dreams. It calls me back. I needed someone outside the bloodline to know. To act. His eyes met mine, and in them I saw not madness, but exhaustion. Then came the sound. A crack. Soft, splintering, like roots tearing through old wood. It came from beneath us. Merriweather stiffened. It knows, he hissed. It heard me. The floor buckled. Crates shifted. My lighter went out. In the dark, something wet and fibrous brushed against my ankle. A root. Cold and alive. I yanked my revolver free, fired into the floorboards. The blast lit the warehouse in a frozen snapshot, Merriweather clutching his chest, eyes wide with terror, and tendrils snaking up through the cracks like skeletal fingers reaching for him. The boards gave way beneath him before I could move. He screamed once as the roots coiled around his legs and dragged him down into the black. The sound cut off like a rope snapping. I stumbled back, heart pounding, the revolver still smoking in my hand. Silence followed, heavy and complete. Only the tide outside whispered against the pilings. Merriweather was gone. I staggered out into the fog, the cold air biting my lungs. My hands trembled as I lit another cigarette. It tasted of iron and ash. The tree's reach was farther than the conservatory. Its roots weren't bound by walls of glass and soil. They stretched under the city itself, feeding in silence, waiting for anyone foolish enough to listen. Merriweather had given me more than a warning. He'd given me a confession. Proof that the deaths were no accident. Proof that the conservatory wasn't a relic of beauty, but a parasite. And now I had a choice. I could burn the whole thing to the ground, risk the city screaming about vandalism, trespass, and lunacy. Or I could keep digging, find the last pieces, the final chain of evidence that would expose everything, no matter who tried to bury it. I ground the cigarette under my heel and looked back at the water. The fog pressed close, swallowing the warehouse whole, leaving only the sound of ropes creaking in the tide. The case wasn't finished. Not yet. But now, for the first time, I felt it wasn't just a case. It was a war. And the enemy had roots deeper than stone. The decision weighed on me like lead in my chest. I could have walked away. Pretended Merriweather's words were delirium, nothing more than a dying man's fevered confession. But I couldn't shake the look in his eyes, the hollow resignation of a man who had carried truth too long and had been broken by it. If I walked away now, the roots would keep spreading. People would keep vanishing. The city wouldn't notice. It never did. It swallowed its own shadows gladly, so long as the lights of its theaters kept burning and the music from its clubs played loud enough to drown out the silence. I wasn't built to walk away. By dawn I was at the conservatory gates again. They hung ajar, dew clinging to the wrought iron like tears. Inside, the glass walls glistened crimson in the rising sun. They didn't reflect the light, they seemed to drink it. The city still slept. No patrols. No visitors. Just me, my revolver, a flask of kerosene I'd lifted from the docks, and a handful of matches. The hum started the moment I crossed the threshold. Low, steady, like the vibration of strings stretched too tight. It crawled through my skull, down my spine, into my bones. Every step deeper into the conservatory felt like descending into another world. The air was damp, heavy with the smell of sap and rot. The central hall rose around me, vast and cathedral-like. And there it was, the tree. Its trunk was broad as a house, bark dark and wet, streaked with crimson veins that pulsed faintly as though with blood. Roots coiled across the marble floor, splitting stone like paper. The canopy stretched so high it vanished into shadow. But it wasn't just the tree. Faces bulged in the bark. Not carved. Not imagined. Pressed outward, straining against the surface as though caught mid-scream. Mouths open. Eyes wide. Hundreds of them, layered over one another, twisting in grotesque relief. Some were frozen in terror, others in rage, others in silent pleading. I recognized one. Lady Constance Merriweather. Her features were faint, blurred by layers of sap and bark, but unmistakable. Her eyes locked on me, and though no breath left her lips, I heard her voice in my head as clear as if she stood beside me. Pierce, help! The hum deepened into a thrum. Roots shifted, slithering across the floor toward me. The revolver felt useless in my hand, a child's toy against something older than the city itself. But the kerosene, that was different. I smashed the flask against the base of the trunk. Liquid ran in rivulets across the bark, dripping into the roots. The smell of fuel mixed with the damp rot. My fingers found the matches. That was when the voices began. Not just one. A chorus. Dozens. Hundreds. They rose from the tree itself, layered whispers that overlapped until they became a roar in my skull. Stay, join us, feed, we are forever. Roots lashed upward, fast as striking serpents. One coiled around my ankle, another around my wrist. Bark split open to reveal hollows like mouths, sap oozing thick and red as blood. The faces strained harder, pressing forward, as if desperate to drag me into their prison. I struck the match. For an instant, light filled the hall. The tree recoiled, a hiss like steam erupting from its trunk. I dropped the match to the kerosene. Flames raced up the bark, spreading faster than I thought possible. The crimson veins flared, glowing white-hot, as though fire had found not wood but arteries. The voices screamed, piercing, unearthly, writhing through the conservatory until the glass itself trembled. The roots thrashed, flinging me across the marble floor. My revolver skittered away into the shadows. Heat seared my face, smoke filling my lungs, but I staggered to my feet, dragging myself toward the exit as the inferno climbed higher. Behind me, the faces in the bark twisted in agony. Some screamed, others wept, and some smiled, relieved at last. The glass dome above shattered, shards raining down as the fire burst outward, sparks carried on the wind. I stumbled through the gates as the entire structure went up in an explosion of flame and glass, the sound like a cathedral collapsing. On the street outside, the city was waking. People rushed to windows, voices cried out, bells rang. By the time the fire brigade arrived, the conservatory was an inferno no hose could tame. I stood among the crowd, smoke curling from my coat, watching as the crimson light bled into the dawn. They would call it arson. They would call it madness. They would call it anything but what it was. And I wouldn't argue. Because the truth was worse. I walked away as the conservatory groaned, its glass skeleton collapsing inward. The voices had fallen silent. For now. But in the silence, I knew this wasn't an ending. Roots that deep don't die in one fire. They smolder. They wait. And one day, someone else will dig too far, feed too much, and the hum will rise again. But when it does, someone will remember. And maybe, just maybe, they'll know to burn it sooner.